Now, the New York Times has obtained leaked Chinese government documents that it says reveal new details about Beijing's crackdown on Muslim Uyghurs in the Xinjiang region. Around 1 million Uyghurs are believed to be interred in what the Chinese call vocational training centres intended to re-educate people leaning towards extremism. Now, the documents include instructions to local authorities on how to handle students returning home and finding family members detained or missing, how to control Uyghurs, and plans to extend restrictions on Islam to other parts of China. And the documents reveal how the crackdown worsened after a hardline local party chief took control of Xinjiang in 2016. The leak also suggests that there's resistance within the Communist Party against the crackdown. Well, let's get more on this now. We're joined by Sophie Richardson, the China director at Human Rights Watch, and she's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Very good to have you with us on Al Jazeera today. It is an extraordinary leak when you go through the documents. You know, we've long heard about what's happening at these camps in Xinjiang, at least in part thanks to organizations like yourselves. But have we ever seen the scale or, you know, how methodical it is?
You know, I think these documents are extraordinary in two ways, not just, as you say, for the details that they provide, but that they clearly show the culpability from Xi Jinping all the way down through local officials in imposing these policies. And of course, as you just mentioned, it seems that some people resisted that. But as a legal matter, it's now incredibly clear who's responsible for these highly abusive policies. At the same time, one reads this story and thinks about all of the people in the Uyghur diaspora worldwide who are reading the same information and really having their worst fears about what's happened to their family members confirmed, and that must just be an excruciating reality for them. And I think increases the pressure for Chinese officials to be held accountable.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, you know, this must be so distressing for the many Uyghurs in the diaspora. We have heard from a lot of them on Al Jazeera. Could this report change things for them, for their families in the camps, though?
I certainly think it brings that much more pressure to bear, particularly on member states of the United Nations, to push for an independent fact-finding mission to the region, ideally under the auspices of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. You know, and for any of the governments that have resisted the idea that Chinese authorities are actually carrying out this campaign of repression, the facade of support for China's position really is starting to crumble. And this report goes a long way towards, you know, denying people the ability to say, well, it's not really happening or there's no credible evidence. Here it is.
And how, you know, much more important is it to do this now, because the report goes into plans, you know, to extend restrictions on Muslims around the country, on other minorities too?
Well, we think it's been urgent to mount that kind of investigation for well over a year now. And I think every day that goes by without holding China accountable reinforces an extraordinary kind of impunity. And if anybody thinks that those abuses are going to stay within China's borders, we've got news for you. They're not. And that's why China really needs to come under pressure right now to play by the same rules as every other government in the world is expected to.
And we've seen, you know, that the government hasn't responded to international pressure at all so far. They have let a few people into these camps, into these areas, but they have been so heavily monitored and their movement restricted.
No, it is certainly a tall order, but let's imagine for a moment that any other government in the world was arbitrarily detaining 1 million Muslims. Let's imagine if the U.S. was doing that, or, you know, Germany or Japan or a country in the Gulf, for example. I think we would see a very different response. And international law and established practice is very clear that the deployment of an independent fact-finding mission that can make a determination about how the international community should then respond is a well-established practice. I mean, look at what's happening with respect to the gross violations of Rohingyas' rights in Myanmar now, or what's happened with North Korea. You know, this is how the world is meant to respond in the face of gross human rights violations. And I think it is especially important to do so with a state as powerful inside and outside the UN system as China.
Ms. Richardson, we thank you very much for your time on this today. We do appreciate it. That is Sophie Richardson live in Washington, D.C. Thank you.